Get off them now! No one expected what happened next when young Prince George witnessed a royal guard being harassed during a ceremony at Buckingham Palace. Known for his quiet demeanor and proper conduct, the 11-year-old prince was about to make a decision that would shock the royal family and leave onlookers speechless. How did a boy so young respond to such a tense moment? And what did his actions reveal about the values instilled within the royal household? Keep reading for the remarkable story that took everyone by surprise. The morning sun stretched long shadows across the forecourt of Buckingham Palace, signaling the start of another iconic British tradition, changing of the guard. The ceremony was scheduled to begin at 11 a.m. Already a crowd had gathered behind the ornate iron gates, hundreds of tourists from around the world, cameras in hand, ready to witness a timeless spectacle of pageantry and precision. Among those present was Prince George, watching from a special viewing area within the palace grounds. Now 11 years old, young royal was beginning to take on more ceremonial duties and educational experiences tied to his future role. Though still a child, George understood the significance of the event. He stood quietly beside his protection officer, dressed in a navy blazer and crisp white shirt, his hair neatly combed, posture straight out. Everything about him reflected the discipline and tradition woven into royal life. It was a cool morning, the sounds of London traffic blending with the excited buzz of tourists speaking in many languages. The anticipation in the air was palpable, charged with reverence, excitement, and the knowledge that they were witnessing something steeped in history. From Wellington Barracks, the royal guards began their solemn march. Their scarlet tunics glowed against the muted gray sky, boots striking the pavement with rhythmic precision. Tall bearskin hats towered above their heads, adding to their already commanding presence. The regimental band followed, brass instruments catching the sunlight. As they filled the air with triumphant military marches to Prince George, the moment was both grand and personal. He felt pride swelling in his chest, watching a ceremony that connected him to centuries of tradition and to the very institution he was born into. For the first time, he was watching the full ritual from start to finish. The synchronized movements, the silent coordination between soldiers. It was like witnessing a language without words. As the ceremony progressed, and the old guard prepared to pass its duties to the new, something unusual caught George's eye. It was subtle at first, but the young prince's sharp gaze picked up on a disturbance in the otherwise flawless routine. A royal guard was being harassed and aided by someone near the gate, breaking the respectful silence of the moment. What happened next no one could have predicted. As the ceremony continued, crowd outside Buckingham Palace swelled. Tourists from around the world pressed eagerly against the barriers, cameras held high, each person hoping to capture a perfect shot of British pageantry in motion. But amid the sea of excitement and curiosity, a darker energy began to emerge. At the front of the crowd stood a group of 3 young men visitors from abroad who had little interest in the ceremony's meaning. Loud and unruly, they treated the changing of the guard not as a solemn tradition, but as a spectacle to mock. What began as immature mimicry soon devolved into outright disrespect. They exaggerated the guard's movements, laughed boisterously, and pointed at their uniforms with sneering expressions. Nearby tourists shifted uncomfortably. Some glanced toward the nearest security officers, who remained focused on managing the larger crowd. The guards, true to their duty, held their positions with unwavering composure, silent, motionless, statuesque. But the situation was escalating. One of the men, dressed in a bright yellow t-shirt and swinging a large camera around his neck, took things a step further. Barking fake commands at the guards in a theatrical tone, he pretended to be an officer, drawing hoots of laughter from his friends. Then he crossed a line. He stepped closer to one of the guards. A young soldier named James Thompson began to heckle him personally. "Bet you're burning up in that hat," he jeered, exaggerating a salute. "Come on, smile for the camera. Go with a little tickle, do the trick." Thompson didn't move. His training demanded restraint. He was a representative of centuries of tradition, and protocol forbade any reaction. But behind the stoic expression, he was enduring humiliation. "You actually think you look impressive?" the man sneered. "This isn't a real job." Just playing dress-up. The crowd began to murmur in discomfort. Cameras lowered, smiles faded. Still the guards remained statuesque. Still, security held its position, and from a distance, one young boy had seen enough. Prince George, watching quietly from the secure viewing area with his protection officer nearby, was visibly disturbed. Confusion had shifted into concern, now into resolve. To George, the royal guards were not just ceremonial figures, they were defenders of the crown, men of discipline and service. To see them mocked so openly, while powerless to respond, struck something deep within him. Then, without a word to his protection officer, or seeking permission from his parents, the young prince stepped forward. The move was deliberate and calm. His small frame emerged from behind the rope barrier, walking directly toward the source of the disturbance. At just 11 years old, his presence was enough to make people stop and take notice. The yellow-shirted man turned, startled. His laughter faltered. Prince George met his eyes not with anger, but with firm, composed disapproval. The crowd fell silent as Prince George stepped forward. His protection officer immediately snapped to attention, speaking calmly but urgently into his radio. This wasn't in the day's plan. Any deviation from protocol, especially one involving the young heir, required swift and careful response. Still, the officer held back, followed at a measured pace respecting George's clear intent. This wasn't a reckless move. It was deliberate. George walked up to the man in the yellow shirt with the quiet confidence he'd observed countless times in his parents at public engagements. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't scold. He simply met the man's eyes with steady composure. At first, the man looked confused, unsure why a boy just a child had approached him. But as George began to speak, his posture shifted. The prince's voice was calm, but unwavering. Polite, yet firm. He's a real soldier, George said. He trained for this. That uniform means something not just to him, but to all of us. He explained in simple but powerful words that the guard couldn't respond, not because he was weak, but because he was strong enough to stay disciplined in the face of disrespect and mocking someone who can't defend themselves. George said was neither funny nor fair. The crowd, which had been buzzing only moments earlier, fell silent, cameras lowered. A hush rippled across the crowd as attention turned not to the spectacle of the ceremony, but to the boy standing before them. George continued, not as a prince, but as a young voice, standing up for decency. This ceremony is about more than just uniforms and marching, he said. It's about tradition. It's about showing respect to the guards, to our country, to each other. The man in the yellow shirt shifted uncomfortably. The smirk had vanished. Realizing who stood before him and, recognizing the weight of his own actions, his bravado crumbled. I didn't mean, he stammered, but the words caught. His friend stepped back, looking down, trying to disappear into the crowd. George didn't gloat. He didn't wait for an apology. He simply nodded and returned to his position, calm and composed, the moment already speaking louder than any punishment. Behind the scenes, the palace's security team had been watching closely. Discreet but ready, additional officers moved in with quiet efficiency, ensuring the prince's safety without drawing attention. Guard commander, now on the scene, assessed the situation quickly. There was nothing more to de-escalate because George had already done it. What could have become a chaotic confrontation had been diffused with words, empathy, and unexpected courage. The tourists, now deeply ashamed, apologized not just to the prince, but to the guards in the crowd. They admitted they hadn't understood the meaning behind the ceremony and had treated it as a joke. Their tone was sincere. Their behavior changed. Guard James Thompson never broke his stance, but later, off-duty, he shared with colleagues just how much that moment had meant. I couldn't speak, he said, but he did, and that meant everything. A lesson for all. The ceremony resumed, but the atmosphere had shifted. Where once there had been casual chatter and the clicking of cameras, now there was quiet reverence. Parents pointed to Prince George and spoke softly to their children about courage, respect, and standing up for what's right. even when no one expects you to. Palace officials, initially concerned about the prince's unexpected intervention, quickly recognized the deeper impact. He had broken from schedule, but not from values, rather. Then reprimand him. They praised him. What George had done wasn't just bold, it was right. And in a world so often full of noise, a young boy's quiet voice had reminded everyone what true leadership looks like. The incident was quietly logged in internal palace security reports. No official statement was released at the time. The priority was to review the event carefully, ensuring that Prince George's safety hadn't been compromised by his unexpected and unscripted intervention. But what seemed like a small disruption in the ceremonial schedule was, in reality, the beginning of a much larger shift, one that would influence palace protocols and public perception for years to come. A family's reaction when Prince William and Princess Catherine were briefed on what had happened, their initial reaction was one of parental concern. George had acted on instinct, stepping outside the protective guidance of his security detail. The risks were real, so that any deviation from royal protocol was taken seriously. Yet, as they learned more about how he had handled himself, his calm demeanor, his respectful tone, and his firm moral stance, those concerns gave way to a deep and quiet pride. Prince William, a former military officer himself, was particularly moved. He understood better than most the pressure faced by guards in uniform, especially when provoked but bound by duty not to respond. George's empathy for the soldier and his instinct to defend someone in a powerless position struck a personal chord. In his son, William saw echoes of his own mother, Princess Diana, who had often chosen compassion over protocol when it mattered most. Princess Catherine, too, was proud. George's composure, maturity, kindness had revealed that the values she and William had worked so hard to instill, dignity, respect, and courage, were taking root. Royal reflections and internal change. King Charles was also informed of the event. According to palace sources, the monarch was quietly pleased by his grandson's actions. He viewed them not just as a reflection of good parenting, but as a promising sign of George's developing character, one marked by courage, conscience, and a growing sense of duty. Behind palace walls, conversations began. While George's actions had been commendable, his spontaneous decision had highlighted a gap in royal training. How should young royals respond in moments of public disruption? How do you balance moral courage with security protocol? In the weeks that followed, internal discussions led to the development of new guidelines for royal children, teaching them when it's appropriate to speak up, when to allow trained personnel to intervene. The goal was not to suppress their voices, but to empower them with both the confidence to act and the wisdom to assess risk. Security teams were also given updated protocols on identifying and addressing harassment of ceremonial guards more swiftly, so that future situations could be resolved professionally without requiring intervention from members of the royal family. Though the palace did not publicize the incident, the story inevitably surfaced. Whispers turned into reports, and soon, headlines around the world were praising the young prince who had stood up for a soldier without saying a single harsh word. Social media lit up with admiration. Hashtags like #PrinceGeorge and #FutureKing began trending, not for his royal lineage, but for his quiet act of integrity. Journalists, commentators, and even veterans weighed in, praising George's courage and composure. Many noted how his actions reflected not just personal values, but a broader commitment to duty and respect, to ideals the royal family seeks to uphold. Parents around the world shared the story with their children, using it as a real-life example of how to stand up for others in moments that matter. What began as a simple gesture, young boys standing up for a soldier, had become something far more powerful. It was a reminder that leadership isn't always about grand speeches or official titles. Sometimes, it's about recognizing when something is wrong and having the quiet courage to make it right. And in that moment, on the forecourt of Buckingham Palace, the world caught a glimpse of the future king, not in ceremony, but in character. Prince George's quiet decision to defend a royal guard had an impact far beyond the gates of Buckingham Palace. His willingness to speak up for someone who could not defend themselves resonated deeply with people around the world, especially those who had faced similar moments of helplessness or disrespect. Veterans organizations were among the most vocal. In their support, former service members shared personal stories of being mocked or dismissed while in uniform. For them, George's actions weren't just admirable, they were affirming. A future king had stood up for those who serve. In public and without hesitation, the incident sparked a broader, cultural conversation about the role and treatment of ceremonial guards. Many admitted they had never considered how difficult it must be to endure ridicule while standing silent and composed. What had once seemed like a stoic performance was now seen as an act of quiet strength. Some critics argued the situation should never have escalated to the point where a child felt the need to intervene, citing a lack of crowd control. But even those voices were often drowned out by praise, not just for George's courage, but for the clarity of his instincts and character. A teachable moment. Across the world, educators quickly took note. Schools began using George's story as a real-world example of moral courage, proof that even young people can make a difference by standing up against mistreatment. Teachers found in his story a powerful message: doing the right thing doesn't always mean following the rules. Sometimes means challenging them with kindness and purpose. Tourism offices also took action. Guides and visitor materials were updated to better explain the significance of royal ceremonies, including etiquette and the expectations for respectful behavior around guards. The aim was not only to inform but to prevent similar incidents from happening again. Inside the palace, a shift in perception within the royal family. The incident became a turning point in how Prince George was seen not just by the public, but by palace insiders, once known mainly as a well-mannered and observant child. He was now recognized for a deeper quality, moral courage. Palace staff reported that George seemed to grow more confident after the incident. He had faced an unexpected and uncomfortable situation, made a difficult choice, and achieved a positive result. That experience gave him a clearer sense of his future responsibilities and the power of his voice. Even at a young age, he began approaching ceremonial duties with renewed interest. Where once he had simply observed, he now engaged with a stronger understanding of the traditions and the people upholding them. His connection with palace personnel, especially the guards, deepened. They saw in him a young royal who not only appreciated their service, but was willing to stand up for it. Legacy in the making, the incident soon became a reference point within royal circles. Stories shared during training sessions and internal discussions about leadership, values, and the evolving role of modern royals. George's response became a model for how to handle complex public situations with grace and compassion. His parents, Prince William and Princess Catherine, used the moment as a teaching opportunity. They praised his instincts but also reinforced the importance of safety and coordination with protection officers. They wanted to nurture his sense of justice while helping him understand how to act responsibly within his unique role. Publicly, the story cemented George's growing reputation. Royal watchers began to see not just the child of future monarchs but a future monarch in his own right. Speculation grew about how experiences like this would shape his reign: more empathetic, more grounded, and deeply attuned to the people he would one day serve. A new kind of royal leadership. George's intervention offered a glimpse into what leadership looks like in the 21st century royal family, where protocol and tradition still matter, but so do values like compassion, humanity, and moral courage. He reminded the world that the monarchy is not just about ceremony, it's about people. The guards may protect the royals, but the royals, in turn, have a responsibility to protect and honor those who serve them. In that moment, Prince George wasn't just a boy in a blazer. He was a young leader showing the kind of strength that transcends titles. His story is now a part of royal history, not just for what he did, but for why he did it. What do you think of Prince George's response? Do moments like this shape the future of the monarchy for the better? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below.